Hey, it's Jose Galizon. You're watching No Way Jose. You can find me on the No Way Jose YouTube channel, all the major audio podcatchers, and Odyssey as well. Credit to Justin Campbell at jcamp1521 on Twitter if you want to follow him for the intro. You can always go hit him up. I think he does commissions for stuff like this. At least I would assume he still does. Probably would do it for some money if you chip him some. Today, my guest is Aaron of Timeline Earth. We are back. We're finishing out the live reading series of Agorist class theory, so this should be a fun one. It's a short one, as you can tell. It's only 2, as opposed to New Libertarian Manifesto that was like something retarded, like 12. Just want to remind you guys, this will be paywalled, like most things are. So if you are watching on the 5th, it is a live stream, and you are getting it free as long as you're here for the public live stream. It will go behind the paywall after, and it will go up for roughly a week or so later, depending on when I end up, putting it back up, depending on my schedule. If you want to be able to get access to that in the meantime, it's patreon.com, just NoWayJose2020. Lowest level is $2. Highest level is 20, and that's my sponsors. My sponsors are C. McRae of the Whiskey and Tea podcast, Jeremy, who is an Etsy store at etsy.com/shop/raising liberty. You can follow him on Twitter at Jeremy Rhymes, like things rhyming, and that word. Mikkel Thorpe of the Expat Money Show. Make sure you go check out my OKC series if you haven't already. That one's the shit. I'm going to be starting back up here in a couple days, looking back into it with Richard Booth. And I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not sure when I'm dropping this. I think it'll probably be after, but I do have the Dave Smith episode coming up next week, so he'll be back. So pop in for that. Use TopLobsta.com. Use Jose at Chugga for 10% off. If you want to get some of my merch, a bunch of other shows' merches, his art that's not merch or that's not like show-related stuff, he has that as well. With that, let's go ahead and get into it. Hey, what's up, Aaron?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey, what's up? Let's go ahead and get into it. We won't do an intro this time. People know who you are. If they feel like most people aren't just going to show up for the second part of a live reading and that's not watch the first, that'd be weird. So
that would be gay and retarded.
Yeah, make no fucking sense. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're starting off Chapter 5, Libertarian Class Analysis. Feel free to pop in at any time if you have anything that sparks discussion, and we'll go ahead and get into it. Marxist class analysis, with its recurring problem of the cross-class nature of status and anti-status, lies in shreds. Clearly, oppression exists, but another class model is needed to explain how it works. The libertarian class model advanced by Murray and Rothbard is based on the relation of the individual to the state, which springs from Franz Oppenheimer's paradigm of the evolution of the state. The sweep of history, Oppenheimer wrote, was a long account of the parasitic class continually transforming itself with new religions and ideologies to justify its existence and repeatedly hoodwink the productive class into serving it. As Konkin explained, today the state uses democracy, victim participation in his own plunder. Liberalism leashed the state to make it more palatable. Conservatism, which unleashed the state against enemies, commies or capitalists, perverts or straights, heretics or orthodox believers. That's what you call based. And other nostrums, snake oil or anti-concepts to beguile its victims into accepting continued plunder, taxation, murder, war and execution, and slavery, conscription and taxation again. Socialism, including Marxist variants, is just another dogma you suggest.
Can we back up a second?
Yeah. What caught your ear?
I think it's kind of a simplistic view to attribute the state's power to the masses getting hoodwinked and tricked and buying into what's obviously a lie. I think by and large the state operates with the consent of whoever likes the people in charge of the state, which at any point in time could be 50% of the population, or if you count apathetic people, that could be like 75% of the population. I don't know. I think that's it's something that I kind of disagree with Rothbard on. Yeah. Is that the state's only means of tacit consent is by tricking people. It's like, I don't know. I think most people know exactly what's going on and they're all right with it.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with you. I do think that's a blind spot of a lot of libertarian analysis. There definitely is something there. Maybe you can make a case at some points they're hoodwinked, some points they're not, because like you said, like Obviously, you got to think at some point the person's going to be in that they don't like. But even then, some people they know like, oh, that comes with the territory, so I have to, because a lot of people like, you're like, that's the fucking president. Even there's a lot of people who are like that, even when it's not their guy.
It's this weird like a priori truth that if everything was revealed, then people would become anti-statists.
Yeah,
and that's kind of a giant leap to me, at least.
Yeah, I do think that like in a anarchist world or a freer world, I do think the incentives would correct things out, and over time that would diminish. But given the current structure, there are definitely people who gain to benefit and enjoy the way things are. And this is something I like about popular liberties analysis of things. So you kind of almost like a market desire for the state in a sense.
And that's the thing, is any system that can provide material benefits and stability and order, people are generally going to be incentivized to gravitate towards that system, even if it is, fundamentally, I should say, even if freedom and liberty or whatever is not really part of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I do think if things were flipped, like if we were in anarchy or something more along those lines, I do think the incentives would change, and over time that would diminish. But given the current structure, there are definitely people who enjoy the benefits and know what's going on and definitely consent and aren't being hoodwinked. I guess the point is that the people at the top are being hoodwinked, but there are kind of like people in the middle. I guess that's kind of like a spectrum analysis that are kind of like understand that, like, I don't know, mid-level management, mid-level politicians, whatever, what have you. So,
that's this whole concept of the total state. Mm-hmm. Is that even your average 200 follower count Twitter account that parrots the regime, that he is part of the state now. Mm-hmm. Social media is an arm of the state, and you can be either for it or against it, but you're a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it is kind of like a sliding scale. For example, I guess a good example is, I'm sure you saw the LPNH tweet that like people freaked out about a while ago with the Meghan McCain thing. And a lot of people, I'm completely for it. Like, fuck that bitch. But a lot of people make the point that like, well, she's not her father. And it's like, okay, well, she endorsed all of these things, and obviously I can make the case kind of like an Operation Mockingbird. She's basically corporate media. She basically is a wing of it, but there's also the chance that she's completely not at all under the pay of the feds, or is just completely, pushing that. And I think to some extent she is responsible, and basically to some extent is basically the state.
Her whole existence is geared towards legitimizing, the people that we hate. So fuck her.
Yeah, exactly. Which was a part that most people missed, and that's actually kind of why I liked it a lot. A lot of people kept backing off to like, oh, well, this was supposed to be McCain, and like, because technically, if you do analyze it, the point was like, obviously, if you just showed a casket, no one would know it was McCain. So the point was, it wasn't actually pointed at her, but I'm actually fine with it being pointed at her, because I actually think that makes a more interesting point. Because it's a lot easier to get people on with fuck John McCain. It's a lot harder to get people on with fuck his daughter. Because
that whole thread just turned into a really good nexus of where to go if you want to find out who's with you and who's not.
Oh yeah, and I like shit like that. I know a lot of people are upset. They're like, "Well, this is ambiguous," and because they had that other, they also had that the one that they got a lot of trouble for was the 6 million tweet. I'm sure you saw that. Like, I actually like that. I'm a big fan of shit that allows the reader to interpret it, because it allows you to be able to tell if they're working in good faith and where they're coming from, and if they're freaking out, it's like, okay, well, fuck you.
I mean, I went into it knowing full well that it was an anti-Semitic tweet, and I just looked at the people that flipped out about it and was like, all right, I need to block them or mute them or whatever.
Yeah. Those are the best type of tweets, in my opinion. The ambiguous ones that can be interpreted in multiple ways, because you allow your enemy to reveal themselves. So, all right. Almost all libertarians accept that the state divides society into two classes: those that gain by the existence of state and those who lose. Most libertarians who agree that society would be better off if the state were eliminated or at least shrunk significantly. But despite efforts of the late Rothbard and others to raise libertarian class consciousness, most American libertarians seem to find discussion of class theory offensive, impolite, and not respectable. That's kind of funny to tail end what we were just talking
Yeah,
about.
not so much anymore. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sam.
They appear to believe that only right wing kooks and commies talk about ruling class and class structures. Nevertheless, efforts to expand libertarian class theory into a comprehensive model have continued. I gotta say, the full on tanky commies and the right wing kooks, I think, are some of the best people, honestly. So
Some of the best people at distilling what's going on in a digestible manner. Yeah.
yeah. Chapter 6: Radical Libertarian Class Analysis. Murray Rothbard himself continued to expand upon libertarian class theory. His roots in the old right had introduced him to populist bankers, conspiracy theories, and the like. Added class viewpoints came from left statists and earlier anarchists. What he discovered was that the proponents of ruling classes, power elites, politico-economic conspiracies, and higher circles pointed to roughly the same gang at the top of the sociological pyramid. Rothbard introduced the work
What gang was that, Rothbard?
The three parentheses gang, I'm assuming you're getting at? Yeah. 6 milli, yeah. Rothbard introduced the work of three left revisionist analysts to libertarian class theory: Gabriel Kolko, Carl Oglesby, and G. William Domhoff. Never heard of any of them. Historian Kolko's Triumph of Conservatism detailed how capitalists thwarted the relatively free marketplace of the late 19th century and conspired with the state to become robber barons and monopolists. Rothbard's adoption of the Kolko viewpoint severed the alliance between radical libertarians and free market apologists for conservatism. Oglesby, a former president of Students for a Democratic Society, co-authored Containment and Change in 1967, which argued for an alliance between the New Left and the libertarian non-interventionist Old Right in opposing imperialistic U.S. foreign policy. In the Yankee and Cowboy War, Oglesby tied in current assassination conspiracy theories to present a division in the ruling class. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Important for both Rothbard and Oglesby was the division within the higher circles. The internal conflict between those controlling the state manifests itself in political electioneering, corruption and entrapment, assassination, and finally outright warfare. Wrote Konkin, the class consciousness of the superstatists, while high, does not include class solidarity. Yeah, that's an interesting point. The aspect that even though we are kind of doing roughshod labeling these classes, there is, even within these classes, different classes.
Yeah, and usually broken down along ideological lines. At least today, there's a thread by who's that lead singer of Rage Against the Machine, Tom Morello. Basically, it was like a meme of what was it, like, $8 billion to Taiwan, $6 billion to Ukraine, and then goes to like Jackson, Mississippi, and hey, you shouldn't drink the water here. And you got to see that divide between leftists and liberals pretty clearly. It was like, the leftists were basically almost, but not quite, America first.
Yeah.
And that was like the main accusation of the liberals in the thread was like, this is nativism, this is populism, like this, it's but it was very interesting to see that split, and it is along the lines of foreign policy / imperialism.
Yeah, and obviously the easiest divide you can see right now is the Trump-Biden one right now. I mean, that's raging right now. I have a lot to say on that, but it doesn't really make sense in this format for some of the stuff I have to say. Things getting weird. But yeah, there definitely is you do have the ruling class kind of divided up and kind of going against each other in different ways.
And like when we say the ruling class, we don't necessarily mean like people in political power, but someone like Tom Morello definitely commands some cultural sway.
Oh,
You
for
know?
sure. Yeah, in a certain way, you can almost use the Hup argument. He's a little bit of a natural elite, although he's kind of a cunt. In
Yeah.
certain ways, he is a
I don't think
natural
he's a
elite
natural elite. I
in
think he's
his
just
own
a
right.
talented musician.
Yes, in his own right, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of people do hear natural elite and they have this idea of in all regards. No, and I feel like there's different ways you are. He's obviously a talented musician and has a large, sway over the culture. So in a
Yep.
certain sense,
And he is an activist.
yeah.
I don't think he's at any type of level compared to, you know, anyone else really.
Yeah, I get what you mean. He's not the best example, but
Yeah.
he's like kind of a lesser natural elite, I guess, in a
And then
certain sense.
I was going to hit on, I think we mentioned this last episode, but Rothbard's or not even Rothbard, but Konkin's division of classes between those that benefit from the state and those that don't, or those that are
Mm,
predated on. Um, Again, it's maybe he'll switch things up as we go along, but it seems an awful lot like he's limiting the whole predation and benefit aspect to material benefit
mhm,
and material predation. When in 2022, um, we can see that uh, it's not even about material benefit anymore. I mean, it certainly is for most people, but this is why I think this class theory is kind of incomplete, is because you'll have people in a lower material class that are ecstatic with their life because of the non-material benefit that they get from the state, which
mhm.
is which we see when they, parrot, parrot regime talking points and you know ESG and DEI talking points. They get benefit from that psychic benefit, which I mean, it's not replaced material benefit yet, but it's definitely, something to consider.
Yeah, I guess it's more of the cultural aspect that's
Hmm.
kind of missing, and because I kind of got in a little bit of a not an argument, but I guess a semantic discussion the other day. I think this kind of is a similar thing. We were talking about like kind of people who understand economics as meaning anything, or meaning everything, and I kind of understand economics as meaning everything, but I also kind of blur my definition of what economics is because I bring it down to values because
Hmm.
you can have something that's a monetary value or it can just be valuable to you. You can value your home, your community. So I see kind of I know that's technically not the right definition, but I find it an easier way to understand it as competing values and how they interact among individual actors. And yeah, I do think most people do end up getting wrapped up in materialism when they understand these type of things, and specifically in goods, monetary type things, services. But there's definitely you could place you could make some sort of imaginary value thing off of, I don't know, whether or not you're allowed to get an abortion in this
Yeah.
country. So
Clout.
yeah,
Clout
clout.
is
Yeah,
is the new currency,
yeah,
for better
yeah.
or worse.
Which I guess that kind of goes to our earlier point in the last episode, where a lot of times we talk past each other when it comes to words. Like, what do you mean? Because a lot of people will accuse people who like say stuff like economics is everything as being like, well, you're so materialist. And I'm like, okay, but
Yeah.
how are they understanding economics? Are
It's
they understanding it the same way as you are? Like, because I've heard that take of
yeah.
economics that I've given by other people. So
I've learned to completely separate like my economic brain from my political brain and from my religious brain, and like like it's like I have to become a completely different person when I'm talking about economics than when I'm talking about, say, religion, because they're often at odds with each other.
mhm.
My economic preferences might not jive with my religious preferences.
Yeah,
Um, but it all depends on the context of the conversation and what, or if, what basically what my mood is. Am I hungry? Am I angry? Like,
yeah. What is your current value judgment at the moment in time?
yeah,
Yeah.
am I being a rational actor right now?
Mhm.
Because when you're talking about economics, you're assuming everybody is a rational actor.
Yeah. Yeah, for real. True. Although the basis of Western economics is very like subjective. So
Hmm.
you can say someone's being an irrational actor, but it really that just means they're acting in their own subjective way. Putting an irrational or rational label on it is kind of that's kind of the whole point. Is you can't really predict these things because people are not perfect rational actors. That if X then Y. That's not how
Hmm.
people operate. So I mean, I guess technically maybe you could get a supercomputer together and create some sort of amazing algorithm, but you're getting to a ridiculous level, and at that point, that's where
Yeah,
commies kind of like cream all over themselves. Like we're gonna figure this out.
yeah,
But
and they don't realize that human beings make irrational decisions all the time. Like, there's no reason for me to prefer the color white over.
mm.
Wait, never mind.
Well, it's also like, yeah, sure. Technically, I guess you could, in a sense, boil down human decision making down to some sort of crazy algorithm. But the problem of the insane amount of input you would need to make this a
Yeah.
proper algorithm would be just beyond the capability of any computer ever. Because
Yep.
it literally could be something of, oh yeah, this one time when I was 5 years old, this thing I don't even remember happened to me, and this affects my decision making in this one way.
That's
You know.
why I'm not like a black pill doomer about AI, because it will never pass a Turing test
Mhm.
until, in order for it to pass a Turing test, we human beings would need to be brought down to the level of the best AI, which is a significant de-evolution.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they're really because you got to think every bit of a human is brought on by literally your entire life, things you don't remember, stuff that happens while you're sleeping. The idea that you could really have that much raw input into your data system to be able to correctly do that is just fucking it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. So yeah, I mean it's theoretically sure, but this
It's
is
not
like
to say that we're not being engineered to be dumbed down to, successfully interact with the best AI possible. I think that's reasonable to assume,
yeah.
but I'm not worried about it anytime in my lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, there always are going to be people that you really probably could do that with, but then
Oh,
there are
absolutely.
people like me and you that are
The
at least on
fucking
the
Zoomers.
yeah, me and you that are probably on the higher end of midwit that I think that even they can't quite get there. So,
Yeah.
but I guess maybe the bulk of the populace probably. But what were the higher circles? The term came from Domhoff, a research professor of psychology, described them as a subtle aristocracy with similar mating habits and association characteristics previously seen in other holders of state power and privilege. Oh, I got the burps. Rothbard's discovery and dissemination of Domhoff's work provided a solid base for his power elite analysis. In nearly every ruling class theory, the top of the status pyramid was occupied by David Rockefeller's interlocking directorate corporate control of U.S. and international finance and the band of core intellectuals and corporate allies found in the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and lesser known groups. Once a ruling group was identified, its nature could be examined further and its actions observed and eventually predicted. Yeah, you just got to follow the money, and it always ends up back to the banks or the big old bankers. Two formidable blocks have prevented even the radical libertarians from offering a comprehensive class model to compete with essentially dead Marxist alternatives. The first block is a culture lag. Most notably in the US, where talking about classes is perceived as offensive and impolite. As Konkin remarked, only rice kooks and commies talk about ruling class and class structures. The second roadblock is simply the limitation of libertarian theory. With the exception of Agorist, even most radical libertarians see a political solution to statism. Even most. Okay. All right. I had to read that again in my head. Wrote Konkin, in building political coalitions to seize the apex of state control, it pays not to look too closely at the class interests of your bankers and temporary allies. That's a good point. A lot of people, I think that's a point that I think too many, even I mean, I'm not sure, like how the money works. Even say an organization is like small, like a Green Party or an LP, but I bet if you look, there might be some moneyed interests that make you question things.
There mi
So,
Yeah, there might be. I think still to this day, it's pretty grassroots.
mm,
That's the whole idea behind populism is, to destroy the bankers. So, like, unless you get some, I don't know, opportunist elite, or an elite that genuinely identifies with, the majority of whatever populism looks like. Um, you're not going to see too much in the way of material support from their end, but it can certainly be there. I know that back in the day you had the Koch brothers were big, libertarian donors, and they weren't in any way, shape, or form willing to, even have the idea of destroying the state, in our lifetime.
Or even minimizing in any really, I don't know, I
No,
guess
just,
effective or meaningful way. I
yeah,
guess.
they wanted state power to go to to get dispersed into, basically their company's power.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much the Rockwell bit about the regime libertarians. A lot of people probably I can't I can't recall his whole little spiel about it, but there's a good little video out there of him talking about them and how they operate.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I know that it's, I guess maybe it's a little bit my conspiracy mind, but I mean, I've been going on a deep dive looking to like Fed stuff recently, between like the Michigan stuff and then I don't know how they get involved in all these different basically creating terrorism and the raw amount of informants and then undercover FBI there are out there. So the idea that, I mean, maybe, I mean, I don't know, I'm just talking on my ass, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if there are people that aren't fully out and out that are moneyed interests that are kind of supporting things, whether it be Green Party, LP, definitely in the main two parties for sure. Like, you're out of your mind if you don't think that.
And so, I mean, even in the context of what we're reading right now, any significant offshoot of agorism, like 3D printing firearms and cryptocurrencies has been subsumed. I don't know if by Fed actors or just, cultural enemies.
Oh, I guarantee there are some in there. Although I do think in the same way, yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, in the same way that because it's the idea. Because I remember I was arguing with somebody recently about like the use or the uselessness of like say an organization like the LP, on the national level. I kind of was talking to someone. I was kind of like, obviously I'm an agorist, but I will give you that I think you're better off going, working with your state caucus than putting any effort whatsoever in the national. And then even then, you're probably better working. The smaller the unit, the easier it is to work within. Because there's less outside influence, less whatever. It's kind of the same idea, and I think it applies to agorism. But the point is, like, it's a lot harder for them to take any sort of effective hold when you're dealing. The further decentralized or whatever you are, the smaller the unit. Because you could have maybe say we were talking about ghost guns today. I'm not saying the dude's a Fed, but like let's say he was a Fed, like. Yeah, okay, he's an influential individual, but like to what extent can he really do anything other than maybe shift some cultural aspects? Like,
well, he can lay the foundation for, that whole 3D,
crackdown.
Yeah, 3D printing firearms, that whole space. Get a critical mass of people in one space, and then you can dictate what the norms are. Okay, we don't allow racists in here. We don't allow homophobes. We don't allow transphobes. We don't allow, whatever. They get to dictate the culture of that dissident space, which essentially makes it a regime approved space.
Yeah, but
you are 3D printing firearms, which they don't like, but you are controlled in that. When you start having kids, you're going to teach them those cultural values and they're going to be compliant.
Yeah. No, but yeah, my point being, it's definitely a lot harder with something like, a free, something like 3D printing where it's individuals. Yeah, you can have large influential people that are, pushing cultural moves one way or the other. But the beautiful thing is at the same time, you can be like, you know what, fuck you. I'm going to be racist and I'm going to print guns. So suck a dick. Whereas if say something like the LP, which, a while ago, they just took out, and I'll give them credit for this, the irrational and repugnant bullshit. I think it's great. They got rid of that. It made no fucking sense from a political standpoint. Or from a principled libertarian standpoint, it made no sense either. But they had it before, and the idea was they can literally have a rule of like, well, if we feel that you did something that's even the least bit racist or interpreted as racist, we can bog you down in this bullshit and possibly maybe, hold up this or that and make your political runs, hell or not able to happen at all. Whereas, in the 3D printing gun type thing, it'd be like, well, fuck you, I'm still going to print guns. So, Like,
No,
so,
it's just poisoning the well from the inside. When
yep.
when 3D printing, when 3D printed firearms enthusiasts start to get divided along cultural lines, then that's how you subvert it. That's you. I don't have to tell. I don't have to tell you what happens when when you're a criminal and you don't like another criminal.
Yeah. um, yeah, we talked about that a little bit last time as well. Yeah, that's definitely an issue. Yeah, there definitely is something to having your own OPSEC, and I guess that we are also talking about being a cleansing mechanism. If you're stupid enough to interact with people who you clearly are going to fuck you over,
Yeah.
well, then you may pay the cost for it, and that's kind of, I guess, the free
Darwin at
market doing
work.
its job. Yeah. So, this limitation can be understood another way. When libertarian ideologues attack alleged libertarians for not freeing themselves of state institutions, state subsidies, or actual state jobs, they reply to Kuke. I forget I forget what the fuck that means. Whatever. That is, how can the purest libertarians enjoy the supposed benefits of state roads, monopolize postal delivery, and even municipal sidewalks, and then accuse those wearing a libertarian label of selling out by getting elected to office, accepting collected salaries, and wielding actual political power on the way to withering away the state, no doubt. All right. Agorists have had no such problem with a distinction, nor do they find any disjunction between means and ends. Furthermore, the simple premise of agorist class theory lead quickly to sharp judgments about the moral nature, libertarian theory, and practical nature of any individual's human action. I do want to point out the means and ends thing. I bring this up frequently every time I talk about agorism, but I do think that is actually one of the best things about agorism is the idea, because the problem with a lot of political stuff is, especially when it comes to like Machiavellianism, if you're trying to lead some sort of major, and not that I necessarily have any issue with Machiavellianism, I just think the issue is if you're trying to lead some sort of movement or political thing, if you're making this move and that move and acting in dishonest ways and doing this and doing that, the idea that this is going to be some sort of thing that can act in perpetuity, that this is going to be able to pass on to another person while you're doing these confusing things behind the scene, and you're also sending these confusing signals to followers below you, that will ever work out, is, I find, to be silly. Whereas with agorism, extremely simple. And I know a lot of people can have complaints here and there, but it's very simple. Means and ends completely comport. They match up, and there's nothing that gets confusing in that regard. That is, agorists have a comprehensive class theory ready to supplant the Marxist paradigm, which also avoids the flaws in semi-libertarian half-hard theory and its attendant compromises. As to be expected, it begins with counter-economics. All right. You got anything here? We got 2 more chapters.
Yeah.
You look like you're thinking.
Yeah. Trying to apply the whole Machiavellian idea to agorism. I mean, I'm not really plugged into that sphere, but I imagine that there are prolific agorists that do have that drive for, drive for power, and that drive to, move things in the direction of agorism, in a meaningful and intelligent way. Because I think I think agorists have to be Machiavellian in order to be successful.
In a certain sense, yeah.
Like you have to, in the way that you interact with your customers, and the way that you interact with, the people that help you in your production process, even with law enforcement, you have to have that charisma, that drive for power, and that it factor. I forget what Sam Francis called it, but it was like not machismo, but it was like some Italian word, or yeah. And I think maybe that's why we don't have maybe as much prolific agorists as say political actors, is because, like, if you don't succeed, you either stop being an agorist or you go to jail.
Yeah, no, it's true. I guess in a certain sense you are correct, but I guess my point I was kind of getting at is with the political movement. It's like, yeah, sure, you can be the monarch or whatever, and you can head up some organization, you can make these moves, and the idea of trying to create some sort of consistent road path for going forward in a political movement. Whereas in agorism, you are to some extent acting alone. Yes, you are working with other individuals, but you're not necessarily leading some large movement that you say, do exactly as I do, or do this, or behave in this manner to be able to move in a way. Whereas you're dealing with political theory, I do think it gets confusing with a lot of people, and they're like, especially if you're doing things behind the scenes, it can get lost in the sauce a little bit.
Yeah. Basically, Machiavellian, like a Machiavellian would view things situationally. There would be no higher moral guiding principle. It would be view things situationally and make decisions in a way that either retains your power or expands it. It's think of like, the commie view of capitalism, but like instead of money, it's power. And I think I don't know, like I think agorists have to think like that as well. Whenever they come to a fork in the road, um, they have to think about their um, their material gain, and B, their survival.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I actually agree. I guess maybe my first analysis was a little bit missing. I do, and I guess this kind of plays what I was getting at before, where the smaller the unit, the more the effective the Machiavellian is. I think the Machiavellianism is, because if you are dealing with a large, say you're trying to lead some large political movement and you're acting in a Machiavellian manner, at some point you're going to die, or someone's going to take over your place, and you're essentially passing on the torch. And the idea that they're going to act in the same manner and be able to continue on this thing that you did is a little bit foolish. Whereas if you're acting as an individual, it's like 350 million individual actors acting in their own way. Some people acting Machiavellian in their own manner. You're not. Yeah, you may kind of teach other people, and I guess and maybe they will follow after you, but it's going to be a little bit more personal and it'll be easier to control. So I guess in that manner, you would also, like on a state or county level, you may be able to get away with being more Machiavellian than I think you would on a large fucking level. All right, Chapter 7, Agorist Class Theory. Murray Rothbard took Franz Oppenheimer's distinction between the political means of gaining wealth, state theft, and the economic means, production, then portrayed them as power versus market. Unfortunately, most libertarians haven't applied Rothbard's concept completely and thoroughly. Explained Konkin. Since many libertarians arrived at anarchy from the limited government, classical liberal position, they retain a sort of three-cornered concept of struggle. I do want to point out, the more time goes on, the more I hate classical liberals. I do want to say that. Yeah. I used to kind of just think like, oh, okay, they're all right. But then over time, I fucking hate them.
In the Marxist sense, classical liberalism leads to what we have right now.
Yeah, they're basically centrists. They're like, well, I'm kind of libertarian. The state at one apex, real criminals at a second, and innocent society at a third. Those who commit victimless crimes in the minarchist view may often be put in the criminal class, not for their non-crime victimless act, but for avoiding trial by the state and remaining at large. Again, some anarchists have yet to entirely free themselves from this liberal statist hangover. All right. Remember, the liberal statists want to restrain the state to increase the production of the host to maximize eventual parasitism. That's a good point. I keep bringing up popular liberty, but he said that. But that's a point he's brought up before. It's kind of like when the state's smaller, they kind of increases their production and a lot. Yeah. And this is kind of the story. And I guess we ran the intellectual thought experiment in our last episode about like should we even have ever broken off from England? And because we did have that period of time where it was like, oh cool, things are better, look how small the state is and look where we are now. So like,
I mean, this gets into Kaczynski too, like the sheer volume of choices and food that we have that was brought to us by capitalism has it really made us better? I mean, we're all fat. We're all out of shape. We all die of fucking cancer in our 60s and 70s. It's like an all the better to eat you with, my dear thing.
They control their appetites, but continue the system of plunder. The recent political example of supply-side economics starkly illustrates the basic statist nature of such ideas. The tax rate is lowered in order to encourage greater economic production and thus a greater total tax collection in the long run. Yeah. It is kind of a weird mind fuck, especially for libertarians, that one. So it's kind of like you either gotta, I guess it's like you either gotta have it. It's a great argument for anarchism or full on statism, really.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Or pick up industrial society.
Yeah. Likewise, free. Or I do want to say, for those who aren't aware of, Pete, he's covered it with you, the fucking Kaczynski.
Yep.
You guys did the whole live reading. It was great stuff. So I do suggest anyone who's interested in Kaczynski go check that out. Was it the Pete Quinones show now? I believe now.
Yep.
I think it is now. Okay. Likewise, free enterprise conservatives and libertarian minarchists call for retention of the state, however restricted or restrained. They are the enemy of the agorists, the free market, and complete liberty. Go ahead.
Oh no, it makes sense hearing that quote. That kind of explains the dynamic on the timeline, between well-known agorists and well-known minarchists.
Yeah, or really, even we brought up we kind of brought up like the LPNH thing earlier or whatever, and or stuff like that. Like it's kind of, and I guess this is kind of the divide of respectability politics in general. Is kind of like and this is why a lot of people don't like the current LPs, because there are a lot of anarchists in there, and it's kind of the idea of a lot of people are kind of like, you want to completely take this down, and and you have zero regard or respect for the individuals at the top. Like, what the fuck? That is kind of, I guess that's a good parallel of what he's talking about here in some regards.
Mm-hmm.
They fall on the statist side of the class line. The libertarian rhetoric they offer, Konkin wrote, may be turned or continued to consistency and winning over confused and marginal potential converts, but they offer no material substance for freedom. That is, they are objectively statist. Let me reread that. Who is he referring to? Oh, he's referring to the minarchists and free enterprise conservatives. Okay. I didn't know, because he sometimes lobs bombs at the fucking, like even like anarchist types who want to use the LP. So it's kind of, but yeah, no, there's definitely some truth to that. I guess in some regards, there's a little bit of a stepping stone for a lot of people to get to anarchism, but it is like if you stay there, it is kind of like if anything, you're kind of more of a hindrance than anything.
Yeah. I feel like, especially nowadays, and depending on where you live, whether it's a major urban metropolitan area or if you live in the suburbs or a rural area, that also might hinder or accelerate your evolution towards certain ideologies, as far as whether you value freedom or order or equality.
Yeah. What is meant when a person or group or people are called objectively statist? To agorists, the term is used for those who emulate the state by murdering, stealing, defrauding, raping, and assaulting. These red marketeers, dealing in blood, not gold or trade goods, Konkin explained, are best looked upon as degenerate factions of the ruling class, in contention with the state's police as the Cowboys fight the Yankees, the Morgans fight the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers, and the Soviet statists fight the American statists. These red marketeers, said agorists, are criminals. At the same time, all so-called criminals that do not involve initiation of violence or the threat of it are counter-economic. Since they run counter to the interests of the state, they are usually productive. They are forbidden by the state. They are therefore objectively agorist and thus objectively revolutionary. Wrote Konkin, agorist class theory has the best of both positions, a sharp class line and a graduated spectrum. Individuals are complex and confused. An individual may commit some counter-economic acts and some statist ones. Nonetheless, each act is either counter-economic or statist. People and groups of people can be classified along a spectrum as to the predominance of agorism over statism. Yet at each given moment, one can view an action, judge it immediately, and take concrete counteraction or supportive action if desired. And we talked about this last episode, the idea of that it's good to have the sharp lines, but it's also, at the same time, you kind of need to have a spectral analysis at the same time. And that's
Yeah,
what he's
like
getting at.
agorism is temporal, I guess. You know,
Mhm.
1 hour of the day you might be an agorist, the other 23 you might be a statist.
Yeah.
I'm all right with that.
And it's not, and the point is too, a lot of people will, especially some agorists who don't really understand it, or people who aren't agorists who don't really understand agorism will kind of will make it out like you aren't being a good agorist if you aren't like fully in the black or whatever. And that's not the case at all. And most agorists who understand the theory wouldn't think that. It's completely a, understanding, your cost benefit, which is subjective for each one. And kind of, because you're useless if you're in a fucking jail cell. So the idea is to avoid that. And even on top of that, not even just a jail cell, you're useless if you drive yourself to poverty through fines from the IRS or whatever, what have you. So the idea is to push it to the degree you can without pushing it beyond a spot to where you're able to accept the projected possible risk. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think more people than we realize, do that regularly. I mean, I work with tradespeople all the time.
Yeah.
And, on the weekends, they're doing side gigs for cash.
Mm.
And
yeah, go ahead.
They wouldn't call themselves agorists because they don't know what agorism is, but that's kind of another good little white pill as far as counter economics goes. It's not a perfect system, but the more you're immersed in that world, the more of a white pill it is.
Yeah, and a lot of people will use that point to kind of denigrate agorism as almost just like, well, that's just what people are, and like, but I actually think it's good to kind of have a theory side to it or what have you, and almost in a certain sense, it's almost a little bit like a moral thing as well, where it's kind of like, because there is always, I think, for a lot of people, especially people who aren't really anarchists or fully into this, that when they're doing that stuff, there's a small part in the back of their head, especially from the 12 years of fucking indoctrination or 13 or whatever the hell it is, where they have this small little tinge in the back of their head where like, I'm not really supposed to be doing this. Whereas if you have this like theory or this understanding of how things are, you can kind of have like, well, no, it's fine. If anything, I should be pushing it to the max that I can handle.
Yeah.
So like it allows people to be able to be, I think it is beneficial in that regard, because that's one point Conk would always bring up, is there are people who behave as essentially as counter economists but aren't really agorists in that sense, and then
they're not class conscious at all.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, you have people who are, and this is a common problem. I think most agorists will think on this when they start looking at agorism and realize they were there at one point to where they were libertarians or whatever you want to call yourself, to where you weren't really engaging to the degree you feel like you should have in the counter economy because of some, I don't know, you were stuck in theory. And it's like, no, go fucking do application, bitch. Like, go fucking do something, as opposed to, just having this theory in your head and not doing anything. Mm-hmm. So what about motivation, awareness, consciousness of actions, and their consequences and professions of agreement? They are irrelevant. Agorists judge one solely by one's acts, and one is responsible for fully restoring one's victims to the pre-aggression state of being for each and every act. I'm a little bit.
No preemptive action. Don't do it.
Well,
I can only judge you if you take my kid to the hospital to get hormone replacement therapy. That's when I can judge you.
Okay, that is
it's a nap. It's a variation of the nap.
I know. That is a very, and I know you weren't saying that's how you understand the nap or whatever, but that is a common issue with a lot of people where it's like, oh, well, I can't, like, if so and so says, hey, I'm going to shoot you in the head. Yeah. Like, well, I can't do anything until he tries to. Like, no, and there definitely there's a gray area. Like, and sometimes you are just acting on your gut.
I think it's proven to be more than effective. That if your goal is to play the knockout game, you have to throw the first punch.
Yeah, I mean there's a little bit of being smarter than yeah, they're definitely threats, and that's where things can get a little bit confusing, and it requires a little bit of understanding. But whatever. I'm a little bit of I'm an egoist in a lot of regards, so like I also like, okay.
not even being an egoist. It's just being a normal person that's,
Being,
existing now.
yeah, being not a retard. Yeah, I always can't stand when people use that like version of the nap. I'm like, God, are you fucking retarded? But
It's
okay,
just a cop out to not perform any action whatsoever.
exactly. Konkin explains regular repeated patterns of aggression make one a habitual criminal, a statist. These people earn no wealth and have no property. I don't know, depends what you mean. Their loot is forfeit to revolutionary agorists as agents of the victims. Oh, okay, I get what he means. They earn no wealth and have no property. He means it in the sense of like the proper property. Like you don't have righteous property.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the and you brought up egoism. It's kind of the idea that like the property is just a matter of who has it. Like yeah, you can make a point that like, well, that's not right. I'm like, okay, well, I have it, so. But I get what he means. Their loot is forfeit to revolutionary agorists as agents of the victims. The pure statist subclass includes all political office holders, police, military, civil service, grant holders, and subsidy receivers. I know a lot of people, we brought this up before, a lot of people don't like that, and it does kind of like irk people that are government workers or whatever, but I do think you have to, especially once you start understanding, you do need to realize that like in a certain sense you are the enemy class. Like this isn't what you should be doing, and I also think in a lot of regards it's probably not the most beneficial thing for you in the long run, which that's a longer discussion. I mean, we both got to have active duty, so I think we kind of agree with that as well. We probably could sit down and have a discussion with someone, think about joining, and be like, hey, do you really want to do that? I don't think you're going to really like how this ends. So, I think in the long run, especially these petty government positions, maybe you can make a case if you're an elite class individual. They're like, okay, maybe the juice is worth the squeeze. But but something like military, fucking stuff like that, like no, you probably are better off just never to go there in the first place.
Yeah, but the thing is, the way I would explain that to the average, I'm about to go to the recruiting station, like 19-year-old, it, I, I wouldn't appeal to their sense of morality because they're too stupid right now to think
Yep.
about that. But they do have a hyper aware sense of justice, and when I I would talk to them about, like we talk about, DEI and ESG, and how your entire experience in the Navy is just going to be a 200 slide PowerPoint about like trans rights.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would probably take more of the material argument of like how it's going to work. Like, okay, maybe you could, if you're really going to do just the 4 years and get out, maybe you could actually make a case that's beneficial for you. But even then, likely you're probably going to, I don't know, get married or get pregnant, or your wife's going to get pregnant, or you're going to, I don't know, extend because you're like, well, shit, I'm in a bad economic spot, and then you're going to be stuck in, or whatever, and then you're gonna exactly. Everyone thinks, oh, I'm just gonna do 4 and get out, or at least people who aren't really too keen on it, and then they end up being sucked in for one reason or another.
It's the incentive is there, especially in the Navy. If you are a seagoing rate, like normally your rotation is like 1 enlistment at sea, and then they entice you with like, well, your next enlistment you'll be on shore duty, and it's a regular 9 to 5 job, and relax and reconnect, and like maybe get married. That's the time to have kids and buy a house. So the incentive is there for at least to do 2 enlistments.
Yeah, and they really do. I mean, I know these days it seems like they really do kind of put you on the fast track to making like sergeant or E5 or whatever pretty quickly. So it is like you do get to a point where you're like economically kind of in a good spot, and you're like, fuck, like I want to get out, but I'm making good fucking money and nothing's good on the outside.
I had to start from literally square one. I went to a whole different career field, and but having that military, those military bullet points on my resume meant that I only had to start at square one for like a very compacted amount of time before I kind of made my way up.
I mean, luckily for me and the wife kind of we had just, and it wasn't even like an agorism thing. We had built up a side thing, and it was literally just because we ended up running. My wife ended up she just started having seizures, and we were worried she wasn't going to keep her job. So then we were kind of had the incentive to where we need another economic, another fucking stream of income. And it kind of built up over time. And that was really the only thing that was able to enable me to get out. So I kind of got lucky and even then, I'll be honest, even right now, shit's still like tight. So because I went from like, being like making like damn good money being an E6 with
Yep.
11 years in to fucking like, oh shit. But luckily I'd kind of built up a side stream that was kind of able to cushion the fall. And yeah, it's a bitch. So it
Yeah.
is like I would suggest no one join. Just from a purely materialism type of fucking perspective.
No, I tell people that all the time, like my younger siblings and their friends and younger cousins and all that just graduated high school. Like, what the fuck do I do? And then when college isn't really an option, and I shoot them straight over to job interviews with trades.
Yeah, go grind, bitch. Like
Yep.
everyone wants the quick, easy one, but it's like, sorry, it's not just gonna be easy right from the get go. You're gonna go
You
grind. I
you
tell you.
will not have a job that you enjoy. You will have a job that you tolerate, and you'll never be rich, but you'll be decently well off.
Yep. There is a special subclass of the pure statists who not only accept plunder and enforce or maintain the machinery of the state, but actually direct and control it. In socialist countries, these are the top office holders of the governing political party who usually have top government offices. In the capitalist countries, these super statists seldom appear in government positions, preferring to control directly the wealth of their state interface corporations. Usually banks, energy monopolists, and army suppliers. Here we find the power elite, higher circles, invisible government, ruling class, and insider conspiracy that other ideological groupings have detected and identified. Toward the end of the spectrum are full-time counter-economists, Konkin explained. They reject government offerings and disregard state regulations. If they report an income, it's a tiny proportion of what they actually earn. If they file a report, it's highly misleading but plausible. Their occupations are fulfilling demand that the state strives to suppress or exterminate. They not only act freely, but often heroically. Yes, OnlyFans.
See, the first thing that pops in my mind is like heroin dealers, and
Yeah.
I can't I can't think of any context in which they're acting heroically, unless you fully boil me down to, like delete everything in your brain except libertarianism, then maybe. But like I I don't know. Like I see too much fucking death and destruction just like on my way to work for me to consider them like heroic.
Yeah, I mean the often. But to be fair, he said often, so I mean I
Yeah.
don't. It depends on what he's talking about because there's so many different ways to act in the counter economy. It's just the problem is the first things that comes to mind when everyone thinks of the black market is the shitty stuff. All
Oh yeah.
there's, I mean, literally it could be a mechanic that's just
But
working.
I don't know if Konkin differentiates between, say, the plumber that does side work, helping grandma put in a new toilet, versus like the fentanyl dealer that walks down, like in my area. There's a street called Mass Ave and Melena Cass Boulevard, and like just taking fucking $5 and $10 bills to people that are literally like dying on the street.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, it is like I
Well,
don't know. It's like
we haven't read the whole thing yet, so maybe he
yeah.
will.
Yeah, I don't. I've read. I feel like you're right, though. I mean, maybe he'll go into that. I don't think he will. I don't think he differentiates.
Oh,
I mean,
I'm trying to help him.
he said often heroically, but at the same time, I mean, I don't know. There's definitely maybe an argument to be made. I mean, you could be a semi-moral. I mean, you could be better than the other heroin dealers. You could be the one not lacing your shit with fentanyl. I don't fucking know.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, at the end of the day, there's the market demand, so it's going to happen one way or the other. So it is what it is. Whether you like it or not, I would say probably don't do that. That would be
Yeah. I would go even further and say it's okay to initiate aggression against those people. Only like from a purely utilitarian sense. You know, ma- make the incentive for them to view their job as a lot more dangerous. Like their job should be dangerous just because you're dealing with heroin addicts or just like addicts in general. But I think that's one area where in 2022 maybe Konkin couldn't have foreseen this, but the state really, at least in my area, again, like major urban centers, they kind of just let that happen.
Mhm.
it's not, it's more of a gray market instead of a black market now.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, although I will say, we can go deep theory in that. I do think, and this is why I like Hoppa and shit. I do think in like a free fucking in true anarchy or whatever. I do think those would be things that are frowned upon. So like, yeah, it still exists, but it'd be not in my covenant community. You can go to the outskirts or whatever and do that bullshit, but you best not get caught by any of the people in there.
What's that place in California, like Slab City or something?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Just a hippie fucking commune that's people dying.
No way. Just as the super states understand the state's working and use it consciously, there exist those at the counter-economic end of the spectrum who understand the pure libertarian consistency and morality of their acts. These are the agorists. Against the power elite are the anti-power elite, the revolutionary agorist cadre, Konkin wrote. But what of the middle class of the spectrum? What of those who mix commission of some counter-economic act with some status acts, white spots, their lives summed up by greatness? Konkin described the middle class this way. To the statists, they are the victims, the herds of cattle to be slaughtered and sheep to be sheared. To the agorists, they are the external marketplace to receive nearly everything in trade but trust. And someday they shall either take control of their lives and polarize one way or the other, or fail to do so and shall stagnate in the status swamp or be borne away on the winds of revolutionary change. And I guess this kind of, gets to what I was talking about in the last episode, where I kind of see the future being more of a bifurcation between, two, separate entities, the fucking super cities that we're going to see in the future, and then probably the more free areas in the outskirts. I do think it's kind of like at some point you got to kind of move one way or the other. And I do think counter-economic acts play into that to some regard. So,
yeah. And I do see a role for the political class to play as well, in terms of providing cover for agorism. Increase like kind of what Boston is doing for heroin dealers, where they're just simply not enforcing laws. You could flip that into something that's actually beneficial, and fire a bunch of IRS agents, do a bunch of executive orders taking away regulatory authority, the year old, which never really happens, but repeal some taxes. All that's, it's been done before, but a lot of it's still kind of theory.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I know a lot of people will use that to push it back against agorists, and there's a point to that. And this is my point where it's a matter of perspective. I do think being an agorist or a non-political actor in a weird way does have its influence on the political sphere. So I do think, kind of that is in a lot of regards, a lot of those drug law stuff you were bringing up is mostly influenced because to some extent the state kind of throws up its hands in a lot of ways. And then they start acting in certain ways. I think a lot of people checking out of the system has its effect on the political system as well, to where I think they do. It's almost like they're trying to be more appealing to these people who kind of, pulled out, to where they're kind of like, hey, come back, bitch. And I do think there's something to that. But I guess on the flip side, you could also have the perspective of hey, I could infiltrate the state and push it this way. I mean, I would make the case that there's more to be gained from, pushing it from the outside. In a lot of ways, but people will do that. I guess if you're going to involve yourself in the political system, I prefer you do it in that way. But I do think there's
this is all local, local, county, town, even maybe even state politics. Very, very rarely is it felt on the federal level in any meaningful way.
Yeah,
except when they do crackdown like they are right now. That remains to be seen how painful that's going to be. But I know that, if you have a $601 transaction on your Venmo, you'll get a 1099K in your email or in your app or whatever.
Yeah. No, for sure. All right. Konkin offered scenario using agorist class theory to illustrate the difference between a limited government libertarian and an agorist. Consider the individual standing at the corner of the street. He can see two sides of the building behind him as he prepares to cross the street. He is hailed and turns around to see an acquaintance from the local libertarian club approaching in one direction. The latter advocates working through the system and is an armed government agent. Walking along the other side of the building is another acquaintance, same age, gender, degree, and closeness, and so on, who is a practicing counter-economist. She also may be armed, is undoubtedly carrying the very kind of contraband the state agents is empowered to act on. Seeing you, the first individual waves and confirms she indeed has a legal product and is about to run into libertarian status at the corner. Both are slightly distracted looking at you. The situation is not likely to happen too often, but it's quite possible. Only the removal of complicating factors is contrived. If you fail to act, the counter-economist will be taken by surprise and arrested or killed. If she is warned, she may, at this last minute, elect to defend herself before flight and thus injure the agent. You are aware of this and must act now, or fail to act. The agorist may take some pains to cover his warning so that he will not get involved in a crossfire, but he will act. The socialist has a problem if the state agent works for a socialist state. Even the libertarian has a problem. Let's make it really rough. The state agent contributes heavily to the local libertarian club or party. For whatever reasons, many such people are known to this author. The counter-economist refuses to participate except socially to the group. For whose benefit would the political libertarian act? Such choices will increase in frequency when the state increases repression or the agorists increase their resistance. Both are likely in the near future. Agorist class theory is quite practical. And we are on to the last bit. I do like the point that it kind of brings up there. It almost is kind of getting the crux of the matter of whether violence is justified against you in a sense. Like, you can be a libertarian state actor, but it's like you got to realize, like, hey, if you're in that situation to where you're pushing back in a moral sense, that person against you, that, you know, whether it's a counter-economist or whatever the fuck, and they're not doing anything wrong per your libertarian theory, if you're still acting under the, you know, auspices of the state, you are still, just because you're a libertarian, that doesn't shield you at all. And I do think that's kind of a point that I was kind of getting at with the whole, like, if you're in the military, you just need to realize you are the enemy class. Like, you can try to behave in a certain manner, and I guess you can in certain instances act in certain ways, but, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying not to get this taken off of YouTube. But I think people get what you're talking about. I will say I'm kind of getting at the crux of, like, whether violence is justified. I will always, for a caveat for YouTube, and, you know, I do mean this as well, I think generally speaking, unless you're are in some state to where you have an insane defensive force or whatever, I think offensive force against the state is almost always not pragmatic, but it's usually moral. I'll say that.
It depends on, for me at least, it depends on the context of state. Like, if like I said, you're a heroin dealer and, you know, a cop is approaching a heroin dealer, and the heroin dealer doesn't see the cop, like, I'm probably not going to say anything. Like, yes, that is a counter-economic actor, and yes, the cop is an agent of the state, but that I'm not going to interact with that cop, at least consciously. I'm not interacting with that cop in any way that inconveniences me. But I see, like, the product. I see the product of the heroin dealer more than I see the product of the cop on, like, a day-to-day basis, which is why, like, I don't know, like, this objective morality where that divides between statism and counter-economic activity, like good versus evil or evil versus good. I don't know. Nowadays it's hard for me to get down with that. And maybe in principle, sure, but, you know, like I said, I kind of divide myself between, you know, the context of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree with you in a lot of ways. Like, you know, kind of brought the heroin dealer. I definitely, you know, frown upon that. Now, do I want the state to do anything about it? Not really. But
I'd rather kill him myself.
Yeah, individual actors. I don't know. Okay, like, I'm not. Okay,
I just wouldn't have that much of an opinion about it if
Yeah.
I saw a heroin dealer getting arrested. I'd be like,
yeah, I don't think they should. But, you know, like, you know, at the same time, it's kind of like, if they do,
I'd be hard pressed to care.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good way to put it. Like, I don't think in theory they should, but I'm not really probably going to complain about it much if they do. May even laugh a little bit, you know, which we kind of talked before. I run the last one. This is a little bit. This is kind of short. I know I'm keeping you longer than you want. So let's go ahead and knock this out. Agorist solutions for Marxist problems. Marxist problem. The revolutionary class appears to work against own interests. The proletariat support reactionary politicians. Agorist solution. The counter-economic class cannot work against its interests as long as it's acting counter-economically. Those supporting status politically have internal psychological problems, without doubt, but as a class, these acts dampen the weakening of the state marginally. Someone who earns $60,000 tax-free and contributes to $3,000 politically is a net revolutionary by several $1,000s, several 100%. All right. Marxist problem. Revolutionary states keep selling out to reaction. Agorist solution. There are no such states. Resistance to all states at all times is supported. Marx.
I don't know. The Bolsheviks sure did kill a lot of fucking landowners. I would call that pretty revolutionary.
Yeah, that's true. Marxist problem. Revolutionary parties often betray the victimized class before taking power. Yeah.
Question I always ask is, what did they do to deserve it?
There are no such parties. Resistance to all parties at all times is supported. Marxist problem. Little objective relief can be accomplished by reformist action. Agorists agree. Therefore, one must await the revolution to destroy the system. Until then, revolutionary activities are premature and adventurous. Still, the productive class remains victimized until the class reaches consciousness as a whole. You know what's funny is like that actually reminds me a lot of your standard libertarian belief kind of deal. Is kind of like we got to wait till class consciousness reaches.
We got to spread the message, bro.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and a lot of people do. I mean, not all of them. I think more of the more the people are better on this. Don't, but a lot, especially kind of the classical liberals or minarchists or whatever, will
spread the mess. Step 1, spread the message. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, profit.
Yes, exactly. Agorist solution. Each individual may liberate himself immediately. Incentives for supporting collective action are built in and grow as the self-conscious counter-economy grows. Yeah, I agree with that. But
you just have to jump through the flaming hoops of culture, like a culture where counter-economic a large degree of counter-economic activity, probably whatever degree would break your chains from reliance on the state. That degree would probably be frowned upon by, say, your neighbors, your community. So that's kind of the hurdle that agorism has to climb.
Yeah, I know a lot of people hear the individual may liberate himself immediately line and think that like that almost reads to a lot of people as being like, oh, I'm immediately going to act completely in the black or be, and I will be free. I'm a sovereign citizen or whatever. And that's not what he means at all. And I know you know that, but it's more the idea of that, like, it's more of a mindset of like, I'm acting, and there are these outside things that I know are constants, and I'm behaving around them to the best I can. But I am a free individual, and I will act as such to the best degree I can. It's
when you start analyzing your actions through the lens of that class theory, and that's true of any class theory. It's true of any ideology. Mm-hmm. When you start analyzing your individual actions through that lens, then you become, you become really a vanguard member.
Yeah. All right. Marxist problems. Last one. The class line blurs with time against prediction. Agorist solution. Class line sharpen with time as predicted. I like that last one because I guess that kind of gets what I was talking about too. Is as time, you kind of have to pick one road or the other, and obviously it's a little bit more complicated than kind of like I think Konkin put it, because we brought up culture a lot in this as well. But I do think over time, I think if we could fast forward 100, 200 years, I do think we will see more of a bifurcation. And I think that is in large part to do with kind of I guess, counter economy, liberty, whatever you want to call it, kind of moving one or the other. I do think the authoritarian state is going to get more authoritarian, but with its more authoritarianism, it will recede into its power systems or power centers, and which will allow for more freedom along the outskirts. So I do think you will see essentially the class line sharpening is a way to put it. Yeah. So
yeah, I like you. I think it is going to be based on geographic terms. Urban, suburban, rural.
Mm-hmm.
And
And there will.
I think a lot of it, a lot of the sharpening of class lines is going to be based on proximity to urban centers.
Yeah. I just think and it's not to say even in that situation there can't be agorists within those super cities or whatever. I just think it's going to be harder for you, but at the same time I do think it'll probably be more beneficial. And this is a common agorist point that a lot of people talk about. It's like, if you like people who say if you're a single individual willing to accept more risk, you can live in those urban centers and have a more profitable lifestyle as long as you're got a smart head about you. You can and
within the counter economy, just like the regular economy, there's producers and consumers. I think you're going to see your consumers are going to be centered in the city, and your producers are going to be on the peripheral.
Yeah.
Where
Well, all right.
It's inherently more risky to be a producer in the counter economy than it is to be a consumer. It's it's the dealers that face the consequences. The users,
Yeah, for sure. And with that, we are done. There's an appendix. We definitely don't have time for that. I probably might skim through this later and see if it's worth maybe doing another episode to go through that. But this may be the conclusion. May or may not. I didn't realize there's an appendix. We'll see if it's worth a damn. It is kind of a little essay. But yeah, with that, we are out. You want to go ahead and drop your plugs?
Yeah. You can find me at BTWA Returns on Twitter. And live every Wednesday on Timeline Earth.
Cool. You guys do live? Where do you guys do live at?
It's live.
Oh, live. Okay. I was like, I didn't know there was like a live function for audio only stuff. So I was like,
it's for our Patreon subscribers.
Gotcha.
Sorry,
okay.
You're gonna get into Patreon, then you get all the live recordings.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. All right. With that, this has been the No Way Jose Show. You can find me on YouTube, all major odd podcasters, Odyssey as well. Follow me on Twitter at Senor Jose 2020. I get nuked all the time, just like Aaron. So if you want to follow me on Facebook as a backup, Jose Galisan there. I don't do anything on Facebook, but it's a backup. Patreon.com, No Way Jose 2020. If you want to give me money, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. We are out. Thank you for your time, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
I may see you on a third one. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to skim through the appendix, see if it's worth a damn. All right, we are out. Good.